Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome to the 9th clip of our month of Ramadan. In this clip, inshallah, we're going to discuss verse 133 from Surah Al-A'raf. These verses are revealed describing what happened in the interactions between Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun. And we know that as part of the message that Musa alayhi salam brought to Fir'aun, there were certain signs, there were certain miracles that came down. And these signs and miracles very much look like punishments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent on the people of Fir'aun. The verse says each time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would remove the punishment, and they of course would go back to doing what they were doing, and hence Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send the punishment again, but this time a different form of punishment. So the verse of the Quran says, فَأَرْسَلْنَا عَلَيْهِمُ الطُّوفَانَ وَالْجَرَادَ وَالْقُمَّلَ وَالضَّفَادِعَ. That we sent down the flood, and then we sent down the frogs, and we sent down the grasshoppers, وَالدَّمْ, and we sent down the blood, and many say this is referring to the Nile River turning into blood. So 5 different signs Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions here. And you and I, and this is the point that I wanted to point out, you and I, when we read this verse of the Quran, we think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every step of the way is trying to punish Fir'aun. Because Fir'aun is not your typical person. Fir'aun is one of the most cruel people who has ever lived, right? And that is why even our Prophet, when he wanted to point to someone and say this person is cruel, he used to call that person, who was Abu Jahl, the Fir'aun of my ummah. So Fir'aun is not your typical person. But it's very interesting that when you actually pay attention to the verse of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we sent down all of these as ayatin mufassalatin. We sent down the flood and the frogs and, turned the Nile River into blood. We did all of this, not to punish Fir'aun, but we did all of this so that we could bring Fir'aun back, so we could wake him up. We did not send these as punishment. We sent these as signs to Fir'aun. And then the verse says mufassalatin. Mufassal means something that is separated, right? We sent these, and then we also designed them in a way where it would give Fir'aun and his people the greatest likelihood of coming back to the right path. You see the compassion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how much He wants His servant to come back to the right path. Even though the servant is as arrogant as he is. But the Quran says we put distance between these. So we would put them through one punishment, and then we would remove it, and we would give them some time. Hopefully they wake up. Hopefully they don't go back to doing what they were doing. They would go back to what they were doing. Then we sent the second one. Then we would give them some time. The patience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the forbearance that He is showing to someone like Fir'aun carries with it a huge lesson for you and I. That if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes back again and again and again to hopefully bring Fir'aun back to the right path, someone who is as cruel as Fir'aun is, how many times do you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to come back for you and I? How many times is He going to come back to try to see if we will come back to the right path? And you and I are definitely not as cruel as Fir'aun is, right? So you can imagine the compassion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. You and I sit there and think, well, I committed this haram deed, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like me anymore. Is He going to forgive me? Does He even care about me anymore? And here's Fir'aun, who's doing the terrible things that he's doing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going and knocking on his door multiple times. So you and I, we are to never give up our hope and know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always going to come back looking for you. You just have to answer His call.